Welcome everybody to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. My name is Deadponic, her name is Lady Maeve, and we're going to be exploring all the wacky, insane lore of my D&D homebrew world, Chanel. If you guys want to support us, you can do so on our Patreon page and through my Fiverr page. And Lady Maeve, for what I understand, has her own Start Playing page where you can play D&D games with her. Tell them all about the page.
Hello everyone, Lady Mayfire here again. I DM for adults on startplay.com. You can request games. I have games running currently, and you can let me know what you'd like to play. I also DM for ages 7 to 14 on a platform called OutSchool, which is a homeschooling platform for kids.
And also, if you support us on our Patreon, you can get access to the Discord server and also bloopers and the bingo card whenever we get around to that. But for now, we're going to proceed with the episode. So for this week, I have a question for you, Lady Maeve. Do you like paladins?
Paladins can be fun. It depends on what kind of paladin. They have removed in 5e the requirement that they follow a god or goddess, and they've replaced it with as long as the paladin follows an oath, they can play, which kind of makes for some interesting paladins now that are not just goody two-shoes anymore.
Oh no, goody two shoes can be fun sometimes because you can literally do tiger versus duck. Yeah, you ever seen that?
That is true.
You ever seen that video of like the duck playing Marco Polo with the tiger in the pool, and the tiger just can't?
Yes.
That's
That's
kind
like
of
the duck's like, I'm over here. No, I'm over here. No, I'm over here. It's like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory when he got in the ball pit. Bazinga! 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 Can't get me now.
every time. That one always gets me. Yeah, but so the reason I bring that up is because we're talking about a sort of paladin force, but you could argue that they're technically not paladins, but they follow the paladin path. We're talking about the Solarus Knights, the literal 8 feet tall bodyguards of the Torian royal family. So these guys are the main bodyguard force that protect the royal family. Specifically, they protect King Fair and all relevant other parties. They were created specifically because of the successful assassination of King Felsham, which is Fair's grandfather, and their job is relatively simple. Ensure the safety of the royal family and the overall security of the kingdom by all means. And their number equals exactly 1,200, and every loss has to be replenished almost immediately.
So my question on this is this kingdom big enough to support the recruitment of enough people to replenish a force of at 1,200? Or do they sometimes recruit outside of kingdom?
They recruit outside the kingdom all the time. It's just that they have to have, there's very specific requirements that you need to have in order to even be considered for the program. So the Knights often work with another force called the Sisters of Valkyria. They are the opposite number to them, which they're charged with protecting the Queen and Princess Lucy. And usually whoever is the detail head is the one in charge. It's kind of like the Secret Service, where the Secret Service as a whole protects the president, but it's the guy in charge of the detail that's the one in charge and calls the shots. Have you ever seen that episode of The West Wing where where CJ got that threatening email and Ron Butterfield, he goes to the president and says CJ needs Secret Service protection.
Unfortunately, I have not seen that episode. Um, but I understand where you're going, where whoever's in charge gets to order everyone about. I had a question about that though. What if there's some personal rivalries between the Knights and the sisters? Let's say Knight Bob and Sister Cecilia just really don't click very well with each other. There's just some tension going on there.
Well, usually the higher ups will find a way to work it out, or they'll basically say, "Go to your rooms."
No soup for you for a week. You must behave.
Yeah. So basically, the idea is whoever is, for example, if a sister is protecting the Queen and Princess Lucy, they usually have authority, and any knights in that detail take orders from the sister, and vice versa. Now, it's not exclusive to each organization that they protect a specific focus or a specific person. For example, you can have sisters who protect the king, and you could have knights who protect the queen and Princess Lucy. And sometimes it's even sisters have been placed in charge of protecting the king for very specific events, or royal trips to other kingdoms. And because they don't want an 8 foot tall knight sitting in the carriage, because it would take them a while to get there.
Their heads keep hitting the ceiling every time they hit a bump in the road.
Oh God, yeah. Um, so yeah, so a side note here. Knights and sisters hold military ranks and often have senior authority when deployed in a military operation. And when their protectee is threatened or taken hostage or prisoner, all bets are off, and they basically eliminate the threat. And it should be stated that unlike the sisters, the knights are not gender specific. And if you meet the requirements and can competently handle yourself, it doesn't matter what gender or race you are. There's a wide variety, as opposed to the sisters, who are specifically, they're strictly a female organization.
So that's kind of nice that it's opened up that anyone can be a knight as long as you meet the entry requirements. But if you want to be a sister, and I'm pretty sure we'll get into the sisters later on as their own thing, they're probably a little bit more, I don't want to say picky, but a little bit more strict in their entry terms.
And the other thing is the sisters, they do recruit males, but the males are put into not a specific position, but they're given roles that are kind of in a support role. Like, for example, you'll have like a squire that goes around and make sure the armor is polished and repaired, or you'll have male guards that guard the temple, which is important because having female guards, and specifically sisters guarding their own temple, would kind of stick out.
So the next question is kind of one I got from someone who listened in to the last. And they were wondering, where is it in relation to all of the other kingdoms?
So Tor as a kingdom it's kind of like the Minas Tirith um of the world, of the first continent. It's in the southern section of the world on the east coast. You could say it is kind of like a port city, but for the most part, it's Minas Tirith, except it's bigger, and it doesn't have that obvious like cliff that you can accidentally fall off of. And most of the city itself, specifically the emergency shelter, is built into the mountain itself, and a lot of it is built into the mountain. And there's a lot of nature in the city because it's so big, and they didn't want to chop down the trees and all that. They wanted to kind of preserve it. They also have a lot of um things you would not expect in a city like this. You have like something like a massive garden. You have greenhouses. You've got all kinds of crazy stuff. They even got like a criminal underworld that you enter through going through a tavern and opening up a keg barrel by turning a lever, and it opens up and you just step into the underworld. It's really cool. Um,
Sounds like a very self-sufficient city if it ever went under siege.
Oh, very much so. It can defend itself like from almost any threat. So yeah, so now moving on, the usual recruiting age for a Solarus Knight is usually 14. But there have been exceptions to this. And they go through basically 6 months of induction training, and then they spend the next few years training as full knights, and there have, of course, have been exceptions. So the training itself, most knight candidates go through an initial screening process. The knight abelant, the one who is in charge of finding potential recruits, will put them through a series of tests and trials to test their combat prowess, their tactical sensibilities, and their calm under pressure. And candidates can come from any walk of life, or any species, or anything, as long as they're not, criminals.
So, possible story beat idea. Has anyone ever tried to sneak in as a knight trainee to go through the training and potentially get close to the royal family or the king as an undercover spy or an assassin or anything like that?
No, the net is far too wide and is too deep for even something like that. And they go through intense psychological testing to make sure that they're not, spies or assassins or, psychopaths. Just because you do not want the kind of power that I'm about to talk about in the hands of a psychopath or a serial killer. Trust me.
And as we go through the powers, our listeners will find out that these knights are extremely powerful and can do some very interesting things.
So yeah, we'll talk about the trials and then we'll move on to the actual enhancements and then the powers. So the trials. So you have your classic combat trial, and this is a simple one. It's a combat test against a knight without their armor, and the goal is to see how long the candidate can last before they're either disarmed or subdued.
So for the candidate, is there almost like bull riding, is there a time limit? Like if you can last against this knight for 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you're in? Is there any kind of thing like that?
It's more to test their combat capability and also how do they approach a situation. There have been times where knights have been defeated, but it's very rare, and it often takes a really determined candidate to be able to take a beating and get up and continue to fight even though they're clearly outmatched.
We're looking for some perseverance here.
A lot of perseverance, and also just, tactical sensibilities, like how would you approach somebody who is 8 feet tall and is has massive biceps and can probably not only casually break your arm, but catch your blade and casually break it like a twig.
And if you have that halfling or I don't know if you have the smaller species, gnomes, halflings, they'd probably go for the knees.
I used to be an adventurer like you once, and then I took an arrow in the knee.
I went to the battle and all I got was this arrow to a knee.
Yeah, okay, so then we have the trial of the spear. So the candidate looks into basically a scrying orb, and their mind is transported to the realm of Solar, which is the god of light and the sun. And this has two purposes. It's to give the candidate a small taste of the power that they will be wielding, and to show them where that power comes from and why this particular deity would give this gift to regular mortals.
So the next question came up from the whole, could somebody sneak into the training process for nefarious purposes or stuff? And it's, could this small taste of power, could somebody sneak in, be an undercover agent and not know about it, such as they're under a charm spell or they have an intellect devourer that has taken over their mind and someone's trying to slip them in, and the person themselves doesn't know that they're an undercover agent, but eventually a switch would get flipped.
Yeah, the also thing is that it also this scrying also kind of, it does purify your mind a little bit, but not to the point where it doesn't cure say brainwashing or something like that. It's not that powerful unless you once you get into the induction, and then you once we get to the actual the final ceremony, it makes a lot more sense. But this is just to show the candidate this is what you'll be wielding, and you have to wield it responsibly and also practically and also pragmatically, because you don't want to accidentally throw a lightning spear at an innocent.
So if at any point the candidate fails any of these tests, are they eligible for like joining the city guard or other jobs around the castle? Or are they, thank you for your service, go back to your farm kind of situation?
It's more of a case of, oh, if you're going to be, if you are, like, if you fail any of the tests. Now, the tests are, I describe them more as like a Kobayashi Maru situation where it's a test of character, but if you fail the test overall, then they would probably put you in a position within the Solarus Knights, but you are not a knight yourself. You'd be like something like, there's positions like squires, liaison, support staff, armorers, blacksmiths, messengers, all that kind of stuff. The support roles where they need people like that who have particular skills, or they need people who are devoted to the cause, but they're not eligible to become knights. They can put them in these roles and say, you are still important, even though you got rejected to become a knight. We still need you in this role or this area because we don't have the support staff, or we're running out of people because they either quit or they retire or things like that.
And the other question is, if they fail, are they allowed to try again? And is there a certain number of times they're allowed to try before they're just told, no, you're done, you can't come back anymore?
Well, once you, considering that their recruiting age is 14, they can come back, but once they hit 18, then that's it. There's like, it's not going to happen, because the enhancements that we're going to talk about later are designed specifically for like young adolescent between 14 and 17. So, and 18 is when you start, you've stopped, growing technically, and the enhancement would basically, they're not designed for like adults, with one exception that we'll get into later.
Of course, yes. Okay, so that's good to know that if they fail one time, they get a little bit of grace and they can try again. Now, of course, I'm not talking about those of them that are failing the psychological point of the exam, probably just the physical parts of the exam.
Yeah, the other one is the standard psychological and background test, which is just basically just to avoid any infiltrators and the serial killers who who might gain power that they have absolutely no right to wield, and once they become a knight, they're kind of unstoppable in a way. We'll get into.
You don't want a rogue knight. That is not a good thing.
Oh no, it is not, because imagine a red dragon fused with a black dragon running around burning villages, and it's kind of the same idea.
It's too much power in the sake of one person.
So the final test is a survival test. This is your basic survival test. A candidate is basically taken to an area and told to survive for a minimum 5 days with nothing but the clothes on their back. And they get one weapon of their choice and their basic survival gear. All the while, they have to fight off bandits, wild animals, possibly shadows, depending on where they are. Or, in some cases, they may be told to venture into a tomb and retrieve an artifact. And that tomb just happens to be filled with all kinds of undead and other unspeakable monsters. Sometimes, if you're feeling absolutely cruel and you don't like this candidate, you'll send them to the Tomb of Horrors.
That one is fun. There's a lich at the end of it all. The upper levels aren't too bad, but there's a lot of nasty things in the Tomb of Horror. It sounds like this would be a really cool one-shot to run with players where, hey, you're a knight trainee, we're only going to play this for one day, you don't have all these awesome powers, you're just like paladin, and you have to run in, get the goblet, and get out, and then just see what kind of shenanigans ensue.
And usually for survival tests, the fatality rate is only 5%. Usually. Because they do make sure that the candidate is relatively safe. But they do want to put them in danger and kind of test them under fire. And usually all these tests are designed specifically to root out the best of the best of the lot. And the survival test is really the only one that actually produces fatalities because of the environment and the hostile wildlife, such as a grunkar, which is hard to describe what a grunkar is.
I was wondering what those are. I have not come across that before.
Well, basically, a grunkar is, think of it like a combination of a lion, a scorpion, and a bunch of other things. It's kind of like the chimera of my D&D world, except it's far more deadly than a chimera.
And add extra monsters in as you'd like, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's a little hard to explain. There's something called the Grunkar Hydra, which, oh boy, that's that's not something you want to come across.
All right. We'll probably get into lore later on about how these come into being. I'm sure there's some kind of dark magic involved in their creation.
Oh gosh.
They sound like a fun monster to run against the players.
So once the candidate has been evaluated and they go through all their trials and they pass them, they will become knight recruits and be taken for further training. And the training is a grueling 6 months long regime designed to get their bodies and their mind ready for the augmentations that come near the end before their graduation ceremony.
So we're talking about how these are knights recruits about the age 14. The question is, let's say you have a storyline you'd like to run, or some of your players would like to try to become these knights. What level character would you suggest would go into the training to begin with?
I would say between level 5 and level 7. That would be ideal because you have a little bit of combat experience. You've had a little bit of an adventure, and maybe, just maybe, you'll catch the attention of a Knight Aberrant who is probably watching you, either one or all of you, with great interest, and they're like, hey, we can use you we can use you as kind of like a canary, or we can actually put you through the Knights program and see if you come out the other end with your sanity intact.
And then looking at some of the powers they're going to get, which we haven't gone into yet, we will be going into that soon. I was estimating maybe they're going to come out at level 13, 14, or 15, even though it's like a 6-month span.
Give or take, I would say, yeah, that's fairly accurate, actually. That's actually almost bang on the mark. Now, unlike most settings that have super enhanced soldiers like, say, Warhammer or Halo, or even Marvel, where the augmentation is surgically performed, but in the case of Captain America, it would be an injection. But unlike that, the Knight's augmentation is all natural. And their food is carefully prepared to give them the necessary energy that they'll be required for the daily runs, the combat drills, and the tactical strategy classes.
So the question for this one is, what would happen if somebody went in there and tampered with the food that the trainees were getting in? Some kind of magical spell, or just plain up poison?
Well, because this food is prepared specifically, it always goes through a vetting process, and the chef always makes sure that there's no chance of that happening. It does happen, but it's very rare.
Okay, so they've got checks and balances in place to prevent people from messing with the trainees.
Exactly. Now, there is a total of 8 augmentations that a knight receives, and over the course of their training, they'll receive each of them, but a large majority of the augmentations are received at the end of the 6 months. And the first augmentation is basically it is your classic muscle growth and height enhancement. It increases muscle growth, and by extension, it enhances the body's ability to handle the increase in muscle mass. It also increases their height to exactly 8 feet, and every recruit's height enhancement is tailored specifically to them so that there isn't a rejection or they're not super tall. So, for example, a halfling, instead of going all the way up to 8 feet, they would be enhanced to, say, I don't know, like maybe 6 feet to give it. It's proportional to the species in particular, and this is done via 2 methods. The first is the food they eat is laced with a natural growth hormone that effectively triggers pubescent growth, and it removes many of the downsides of puberty as well. And this is done over the course of 2 months to help them adjust to the new height and muscle mass. And once this is done, they go to method 2, which is the next part of the training, which is strength and endurance training. This is done by lifting weights, pushing around, and lifting dummies. The endurance training, which helps them regulate their heartbeat so they can function in a stressful condition and hostile environment. And this also plays into the strength enhancement that they will receive later.
One of my thoughts was, if you're going to build an army, and you can make all your soldiers the same size, that would save a lot of money in the uniform department, because pretty much everyone can wear the exact same uniform, the armor would all fit the same, the weapons would all be the same size, so you could almost, I don't want to say industrialize your war machine, but it would really be nice to have everything streamlined so that everyone gets the same weapon, everyone gets the same armor to wear, and it would, you don't have 50 different uniform sizes and 20 different swords that fit different size people.
Well, the idea is that the Solarus Knight is considered to be the elite of the elite. So if you have a problem, if no one else can help, and you need a solution, maybe you can hire the Solarus Knight. Cue the A-Team theme. Dear God.
You can hire them. That is good to know. So they're bodyguards to the royal family. These extra missions, is that how the knights fund themselves, or are they funded through the government?
They're funded through the government, and they get a pretty sizable paycheck. But the thing is if you have a problem that needs an unconventional solution, or your army just sucks because you keep getting killed by that black dragon over there, you send in a Solarus Knight. And if you have to send in an army of Solarus Knights, you've got a very serious problem.
So I'm guessing as long as the party is friendly to the kingdom, you can maybe diplomatically ask the king, hey, can we have a knight or two? Almost like, I know in 40K, Warhammer 40K, the Space Marines, you're only supposed to need like 1 or 2 to deal with problems. If they're sending in a whole squad, the world's getting taken over by something bad.
Yeah, like in Space Marine 2, where they have to deal with Tyranids. Now, Tyranids are a very specific threat where you need an army of Space Marines to deal with them. It's not like the Astra Militarum, where you can send in millions and millions of men, and, even though, don't get me wrong, the Guardsman is very capable and well-trained, they're still fighting a biological monstrosity that will probably tear them to ribbons. With the Space Marine,
and just so everyone knows, I play Tyranids in 40K, and Hive Fleet Monarch has eaten many a Space Marine army, and they are tasty with ketchup.
Yeah, it's the thing about that is that when you have to send in like a Space Marine it's kind of like how the Guardsmen are basically a big old a hammer attached to a big old stick, and you beat the crap out of things. With a Space Marine, they're a scalpel. They're designed to basically, they're designed to do a surgical incision, get to the root of the problem, and take it out completely with no shenanigans. That's kind of what the Solarus Knights are, except they're scary, because if you have a Solarus Knight knocking on your door, you did something very bad. And the reason that there's a reason why the Charians are so afraid of the Solarus Knights, because if they ever succeeded in assassinating the king, the Solarus Knights would have a blank check and basically raze Char to the ground.
It's kind of like, let's see. Is it worse to have this king in charge, or is it worse to have no kingdom left? You gotta weigh your options as an enemy.
Yeah, and there's a reason why the Charians decided, well, maybe we'll go through a second-hand party, like say a mercenary, to try to assassinate the royal family, or maybe we'll contact the Shadows and get somebody and see what they can do.
So for those who are listening in for the first time, is the Sharians the main enemy of the Kingdom of Fae?
For of Chanel, yeah, they're for now they are the main enemy, but there is another enemy that lingers over the hill. We'll get to him eventually, but for now the Charians are the main enemy because somebody decided, let's go on what they refer to as a revenge crusade. And, well, I'm not going to go into further details because I don't want to get kicked off YouTube, but basically the Charians are very bad people. They're they're just very bad people, and it's not their own fault. It's the circumstances of how they rose up from the ashes of what happened to them. Anyway,
But
moving.
anyway, back to the Knights. Yes,
Yeah,
we'll get into that another day. That's a whole realm of lore there.
yeah. So the next enhancement is actually an implant. It is a secondary cardiovascular implant, and this is the first of the implanted organs. It basically acts as a second heart. And it works kind of like a backup generator that supplies extra blood in case of an emergency. And the endurance training that the recruit goes through during the first phase is designed to help them prepare for this augmentation.
Kind of make sure all the hearts and lungs and blood vessels are working together well.
Yeah,
So for this extra implant, I'm gonna guess it's kind of what, a secondary heart kind of thing with extra veins and things.
yeah, it's connected to the main heart, and in case the main heart stops for some reason, it can kick in. It's kind of like I said, it's kind of like a backup generator. So, and it's kind of like what's that? It's that the Generac. It's like if your main power goes out, you have the Generac.
Interact generators.
I love those things.
I need to get one of those. Those are good. So the question is, when they install this backup system, do they have choices of where they can install it on the person so that like you always keep the enemy guessing? It's like, hey, I know the heart is always on the left side of the body, so if I stab there, I'm going to get the heart, but is the backup heart on the left side, or on this person it's on the right side, or in that person it's in the leg? Do they have options where they can install it?
They usually don't really have a choice on that because they're usually, it's a surgical procedure, so they're usually sedated. But it's usually placed on the opposite side of the heart, and not many people know that they have a secondary heart. It's kind of one of the most.
Okay.
It's kind of it's a closely guarded secret, and
Okay, so that's how they protect it, is nobody really knows it's there.
yeah.
They,
So
they almost become a Gallifreyan from Doctor Who with the double heart situation going on.
don't worry, we'll get into Doctor Who at some point. That'll be a tangent for another day. But it's funny you mentioned that, yeah. But unlike the Doctor, they don't it doesn't actually it doesn't function. It doesn't it's basically it's a backup generator. It comes on in a case of an emergency, and the only time it comes up in an emergency is when a knight basically is on the verge of death, but they have ways to either mitigate this or to heal themselves.
And I know we'll get into that a little further down the line.
Yeah. So the next augmentation is the agility and reflex augmentation, and this is the first of the magical enhancements. So the recruit's natural agility, speed, and reflexes are enhanced to such a point that they can move as fast as a fully sprinting horse. The agility is enhanced so that they can perform a full somersault through the air even while armored. And it's often said, much like with Space Marines, that they should not be able to move this fast with that much armor. But keeping in mind that the armor is tailored to them, so it feels like just regular armor. It's like a piece of clothing to them. And the reflexes are advanced to a point where the recruit will develop something called effectively a quote-unquote danger sense, kind of like the spider sense, if you will. And they can
Spidey sense.
yeah, and they can dodge arrows and crossbow bolts traveling at full speed, and it can even catch arrows with no issue. they're that good. It's kind of like RoboCop when he caught the bullet, or when he shoots a bullet out of the air with another bullet. It's it's kind of like that.
And so in D&D lore, it sounds very much like there's a spell in D&D called haste that will increase the character's speed. It will give them an extra action every turn. It sounds like these knights always have this hasted ability upon them because they can move super fast. They've got the extra reflexes to do things. So the question is, there's a counter to this called the slow spell. So how would you feel that the slow spell would affect the knights if they get caught in its effect?
Believe it or not, that actually plays into the next magical enhancer, which is magical immunity. The Solarus Knights are given resistance to charm, fear, and poison effects, and also, immunity to slow, which I don't characterize as a fear effect, but it the fear effect, the slow would basically, it wouldn't slow them down all the way. It would kind of like how a Solarus Knight will, with their reflex enhancement, would basically, they would be moving at, let's say, 150% speed generally. With a slow spell, you would bring that down to like 140% or 135%. You're not technically slowing them down all the way. You're just slowing them down just enough that it's noticeable.
Just a teeny bit.
Yeah.
Just a teeny bit.
I like to think of the Solarus Knights when they have like their speed enhancements. They're kind of like the Roadrunner.
So that'd be interesting that they're immune to magic effects and things like that. So these knights are pretty much the equivalent of, in your game, having a level 20 shopkeeper that, you don't want to get on their bad side. They're here to help, but if you anger them, you're going to regret it as a character, as a player. You really don't want to get on their bad side.
Yeah, you know that scene in Frozen where like Hans, like not Han, is it, no, it's not Hans, it's Kristoff. He upsets the shopkeep, and then the shopkeep stands up and he's like 7 feet tall. It's kind of like that.
Yes.
Oh,
Be careful who you're messing with.
Oh god, I just made a Frozen reference.
Oh no. Oh, just let it go. Just let it go.
Oh god. Yeah. So we've already covered the magical immunity, but the next one is the strength enhancement. So they're given the strength enhancement. It's another magical enhancement, and they're able to carry up to 5 times their weight, which a knight generally weighs, with their full armor on, it weighs about, I would say, about 250 pounds, give or take. They can casually lift a full-grown humanoid with one hand, and they can punch cleanly through marble with relative ease. And they also have the ability to casually break limbs, but they are trained to kind of restrain themselves so they don't want to be seen as like monsters despite their imposing nature. It's kind of like the salamanders, another 40K reference here, where the salamanders are considered like good, like space marines, but you get on their bad side and you're gonna feel the flamer coming in your face, basically.
They like fire a lot. Also, let's go another Disney reference. Luisa from Encanto, like she can lift like 5-10 donkeys, carry them around no problem. That would be about close to what they can carry. Is a bunch of, like, they could pick up your horse and carry it for you. Those weigh about a ton. They would easily be able to pick up the horse and carry the horse away.
They could pick up like a full-on, like a carriage by themselves, no issue.
That would be fun to watch coming down the road. Is just a knight with a carriage up on his shoulder, and he's bringing it into town because they broke a wagon wheel, or etc., etc.
Yeah, so the next one is it's the perfect regular and dark vision enhancement. So their vision is enhanced to where it is perfect, and they can see up to 5 miles away, no issue. And they can operate in full darkness without the need for night vision, or, night vision goggles. And this also comes with the benefit of them having a little bit of thermal vision to pick up anything in the dark. However, they have the ability to actually turn this off so they can use regular night and thermal vision monocles. So they're kind of like, this vision enhancement is kind of like the Predator, if you will.
Where he has that thermal imaging and can find you. So if you want to stay away from these guys, either cover yourself in wet mud so that your temperature's blocked. Another counter I possibly found to this was maybe a daylight spell when they're trying to use their night vision. But, you really don't want to make these guys angry, so you probably don't want to do that.
Oh yeah, did I mention they also they're kind of like a part plant because literally they're born of the sun, so they can actually use the sun to like heal themselves and enhance themselves just a little bit. Kind of like
That is very interesting that they are part plant creature.
well,
Um,
they have the photosynthesis trait where they can absorb sunlight. It's kind of like Superman, and Superman is basically just one big solar battery. As crazy as that sounds, and it's funny because that's their ability to absorb sunlight. It only enhances them like maybe 1%, but it's effectively it's to remind people that this is still somebody you do not want to screw with, because now if they were to operate in darkness, it's not necessarily they're not at a disadvantage, but they're not at an advantage. It's kind of it cancels itself out. And the only time a Solarus Knight is operating in darkness is if they're on a night op, which and to make another real world comparison here, when in a military situation, the Solarus Knights would technically be equivalent to the U.S. Navy SEALs. They are
okay.
they're
They're going in under the cover of darkness and dealing with the hard questions, as it were.
yeah. You could also compare them a little bit to G.I. Joe, just a little bit.
I'm sure their aim is better than the Joes.
Oh yeah. So the next implant we have is the healing coma implant. So when a knight takes serious damage or pretty much fatal damage, their body will enter basically a low power mode, and they go into a healing trance that gives them basically massive amounts of regeneration. Now they don't do the Doctor Who regeneration. They just kind of self-repair their own body. It's kind of like have you ever played Team Fortress 2?
I have not played that one yet. No.
Okay.
But go ahead.
So you know the Medic's Medigun, right?
Yes, I've seen various versions of that in different games and pop culture and things.
Well, basically, this is like the Medigun going on overdrive a little bit, because the Medigun basically heals everything, and this is basically the implant. When it's triggered, that's what it does. And it can basically, heal any damage, with the sole exception being necrotic damage and shadow damage. And the only way to actually interrupt this is with a special stimulant injection that only a apothecary knows how to use and carries. So, and they're the only ones that know where to inject it. So, but once they come out of, but this healing coma doesn't take very long. Maybe it'll take like a day for them to fully heal.
It sounds a lot like in D&D. There's several monsters that can regenerate over time. You've got your vampires, your trolls, your werewolves, where they'll get a certain number of hit points every 6 seconds. So seeing that these knights are probably level 15, at max, they would probably have 150 or more HP. And you said it's taking about a day for regen. So, every hour they're probably getting back 6 hit points an hour, maybe more if you want them to regen faster.
That's pretty accurate, I would say. So the final augmentation is basically, this is their graduation ceremony, and this is the last augmentation they will receive before they become a full bird knight, is they will basically receive the full blessing of Solaire. This is where an elven priestess will bless a cup of quote-unquote holy wine, And when the knight drinks it, their mind is transported to the sun realm, and they will actually be able to clasp their hand around a sun, and they will receive the ability to channel its full, unrestricted power. But they still need to be trained on how to do this. But now they have full access to it. The power.
So here's a question.
The power
Sorry.
of the sun in the palm of my hand.
The power. Could someone go through all of these steps, all of these upgrades, and just before that ceremony go, nope, I'm not going to do it. See you all later.
Well, keeping in mind that once you're inducted into the program, it's not really it's a big deal if you decide to leave, but keep in mind that you've been augmented, so there's a chance that you might be captured and maybe dissected, and an enemy might learn about the various things that were done to you. So they either have to, silence you, which is one of the more icky parts of the Knights, but it's something they do, but the best time to actually drop out would probably be just before receiving the first augmentation, because they're basically, it's kind of like, Marine school or US Navy SEALs, where they're trying to weed out the weak, and if you decide this is not for you, then you are just free to leave. But you're not judged harshly because you did.
So the point of no return is just before the implants happen.
Basically, yeah.
Or just as that's starting. Did the implantations ever go wrong? Do you ever lose recruits to that situation?
There is a possibility of the actual implants and augmentations being rejected, but it's super rare. There's a 3% chance of fatalities, but every single augmentation is calibrated specifically to each specific recruit. So, for example, your halfling will be enhanced to 6 feet rather than, going all the way up to 8 feet, because it will look unnatural. And the idea of the knights is also they're trying to be imposing, but they're not trying to be super intimidating, because they are still, regular people in a way.
So probably being a knight is a huge honor, huge boon to the family. Does the family of the candidate get better housing conditions, or do they get brought up to the level of a noble if their son or daughter gets accepted into knighthood? Is there a social benefit to it?
Oh, the knights, they take care of them. They take care of their own. So, say if a knight dies, as rare as it is, their family is, pretty much well taken care of. There's, no, negative repercussions on that end of things. And they also get a proper burial or a cremation, depending on their desire. But they also make sure that their families are, well taken care of. And they also have the rare privilege of actually seeing their families, although they do have to keep in mind that now that they're 8 feet tall, they may have to call their parents and tell them to move the sofa a little bit.
Duck when you enter the house, especially if you're a halfling and you've gone from 3 feet to 6, you're probably not going to fit in your family home anymore, and probably have to meet outside at a restaurant or something.
You know that scene in Fellowship of the Ring where Gandalf bumps his head on the
lintel?
Yeah.
Yes.
Apparently that wasn't meant to happen. That was just a thing they kept in because Ian McKellen actually bumped his head, and the response was just so perfect that they kept it in, and it was just an unplanned thing that they didn't expect to happen. It was perfect. That's basically what would basically happen in a way, because halfling homes are not really designed for tall people.
No, not at all. All right, let's get into some of these awesome powers that these guys are going to get.
Yeah, so the first power is lightning strikes, which basically they can channel lightning. Now, it's not like Nordic lightning like the sisters have, but it's more like it's yellow lightning. So basically, this is powered by the sun and it has a golden appearance. And they're capable of actually immolating the target. And sometimes they will leave a small part of the earth scorched, which, is certainly not a good thing if you're fighting in farmland.
So for this one, if you were going to build your own Solarus Knight as a D&D stat block, would they use the lightning spell for this, which does like 8 six-sided dice worth of damage, or would you use something stronger or weaker?
I would say this would be a variant of the lightning spell, where basically the knight like thrusts their hand up into the sky and basically slams it down, and a lightning bolt comes down and fries the target. Um, and the damage that this can do would be roughly the same as a regular lightning spell, maybe increase the damage just a little bit, with the possible chance of setting the person on fire, just a little bit.
Okay. So we've got basically a lightning attack. What else do we have for these guys?
So we have the sun spears, which are basically, they do what the name suggests. The spear is formed from the knight's essence, and they can rip apart beings, and they just chuck this thing at something. And the optimal way they kill things is going straight through them. There's no blood, there's no gore. It's just you chuck the sun spear, it goes through them, and they just feel that pain, that like tiny instant of pain before they realize, I've been impaled, and they fall over and die. In the case of undeads or shadows, it's like being blasted with a flamethrower continuously non-stop. And if a mortal is struck with a lightning spear, they have that moment of euphoria, or even in some cases enlightenment before they, fall over and die, unless the hit wasn't lethal, like sticking a spear in somebody's shoulder, which, another Lord of the Rings reference for those who are listening. King Theoden got a spear shoved into his shoulder, and what does he do? He takes another spear, shoves it in an orc's face, and rips out the spear in his shoulder. It's like, yeah, if that doesn't scream badass, I don't know what does. Also, rest in peace, Bernard Lee. You were awesome.
He was a great, great actor. So what I was going to ask on this, since it is almost like an energy beam, and these guys are being powered by like the god of the sun, it's almost like they're using god energy. If they hit somebody who is like completely good and innocent, and it was just a complete accident that they got hit by the spear, let's say they jumped in front of a villain, would the spear do 0 damage to that person, or would it still do lethal damage if it hit them, let's say, in the heart or some other lethal spot?
No, actually, if it hits an innocent, or an innocent defending a complete monster, then it will basically just knock them on their back without seriously harming them. And keep in mind that the spear it's a spear formed from solar energy, and it functions kind of like a spear, like how like Leonidas chucked the spear into the Persian kind of thing.
Okay, so
I love my movie references.
Movie references are great. So it's kind of like there is no friendly fire with this spell if it's somebody who, or even if the bad guy's holding up an innocent hostage, it's not going to harm the hostage. It's just going to harm the evil ones.
Yeah, pretty much. There is a variant of this spear called the Spear of Eternal Light, which takes the full power of the sun and chucks it at an enemy, but only high-ranking knights and the Solaris Prime, who is basically the big guy, are able to do this.
This would probably be the equivalent of like power word kill with a little bit of radiation damage, where you're doing 12-sided dice of damage, even if it doesn't like completely disintegrate them.
Oh yeah, and this does, like, if we're going off of like damage stats here, this sun spear, just in its base form, does 20 d20 damage to an undead with advantage, and the Spear of Eternal Light does 20 d20 damage against undead and shadows with advantage.
That is a lot of fun to roll. I would like to roll that out a few times just to see what the average damage would be for 20d20 and 50d20. If any of our listeners out there want to play around with their dice rolling apps and Let us know what kind of numbers you come up with. Just comment below the video or
Yeah,
below the podcast.
yeah. So the last power is more of it's a innate power. It's the protective barrier. The knight creates a bubble or circle that defends against most attacks, and if a shadow touches it, they will basically be instantly banished. They don't pass go, they don't collect 200 gold pieces, and they don't even go back to their realm. They just flat out die. The barrier also has minor healing properties and grants a rejuvenation buff, which re-energizes the knight and anybody in the bubble. So basically, uh, you're not getting inside this bubble. Basically, if you are evil, you do not touch bubble.
There is a spell similar to this in D&D called Resilient Sphere, and we just call it the hamster ball of fun, because it basically makes a circle around you, like a giant hamster ball, and you and several people can be inside it. My question was, with this protective barrier, can the knight move from the spot where they set up the barrier, or are they stuck in place?
They're kind of stuck in place because they have to constantly like keep it up. But they can also apply this protective barrier to their personal shield, which is basically like their tower shield, and which makes it much stronger. And this can actually stop necrotic damage, but it doesn't stop shadow damage, unfortunately.
It would be a fun concept, or maybe the higher level knights would have the mobile version, and they could just ping pong or ricochet around the battlefield, bumping into Shadow Spawn and just deleting them from combat.
So yeah, okay. So for our final section, we're going to talk about the most famous person out of the Solarus Knights, which is Commander Graham Viken, current Solarus Prime. So a Solarus Prime is basically the guy who's basically put in charge of all the Solarus Knights and is basically their guy. It's kind of like Marnies Calgar, Chapter Master Tushan, Sly Marbo, Colonel Ironhand Strachan, that kind of thing. Viken is special because he was brought in at a younger age. He was brought in at 12, and he exhibited a strong leadership capability. And he shot up pretty quickly through the ranks until he made Lieutenant Commander. And the story that he is most famous for is how he actually got promoted to Commander and became the Solarus Prime. And it starts with an argument with his lieutenant about dealing with a black dragon that was terrorizing the southern cities. The lieutenant ordered that no knight was to go down there and deal with the dragon. And this is for our MASH lovers out there, this is the Frank being a leatherhead moment, if you will. But Viken, with sanction from the Solarus Prime at the time, actually disobeyed the lieutenant and set off by himself. And he tracked the beast to its lair and found it sitting there waiting for him. And Viken gave him an ultimatum in his own words, and I quote, "Foul beast, hear me. You have slaughtered countless innocents and stolen loot that is not yours. Your wickedness ends today. Do not exit your cave and cease your burning of the villages in the north, or I will show you why I am named a Solarus Knight." The dragon's laugh boomed through the cave, and all he said was, "What is an itty-bitty human going to do to me? Rip off my toenail and stab me with it? That's a paper cut to me, little man." And he basically punts Viken across the cave. Viken gets up, wipes the blood off his face, and basically says something to the effect of, "Buckle up, Buttercup. It's time to redact it around and find out. I'm going to rip off your toe and shove it so far up your end that you'll be redacted up gold pieces for the next 50 years. And he does exactly what he says he's going to do. And the dragon basically starts whimpering and begging for mercy. And Viken gave him a fair warning, of course, and also warned him that he is no ordinary human. He cuts the dragon's head off and slices off his scale. He carries both the scale and the dragon head by himself back to the capital and throws the dragon head at the lieutenant. The lieutenant is not happy and actually wants to strip Viken down to a corporal for disobeying orders. But thankfully, the Solarus Prime stepped in and basically chewed out the lieutenant and effectively exiled him from the organization, basically saying, it turned out that the lieutenant was opting to circumvent the Prime's authority, and Prime was getting sick of the lieutenant's bullying and the other knights, and writing them up for stuff they didn't even do, basically being a Frank. this lieutenant would actually go on to become one of Char's most feared inquisitors, while Viken was granted the title of Solarus Prime after his boss basically decided to retire due to getting up there in the years, and he was getting sick of it. He just kind of wanted to retire and just kind of, settle down, if you will.
Sounds like an epic character to have in the game and have people interact with. Sounds like he's a hothead, but also like very honest, straight, and he won't lie to you. He won't mess around with you, but don't mess around with him. He will punch you across the cave like the dragon.
Oh yeah, and he does not take crap from anybody. Like he won't now he won't disobey the Solarus Prime, but if he gets an order that conflicts with his moral nature, because keep in mind that Solarus Knights are still regular people in that sense, then he'll disobey the order, and he'll basically roast his superior officer. It's kind of like how Hawkeye and BJ basically they constantly mock Frank because Frank is such a leatherhead. But at the same time, he's still technically their commanding officer, which also reminds me of that time that Hawkeye and Colonel Potter were stuck in a trench. They are plastered as hell, and Hawkeye basically he has his gun. He's like he won't fire. He won't even use his gun, and Potter's like, damn it, Pierce, fire that weapon. So he looks at the gun, he says, all right, you're fired.
You're out of here. You no longer work for me.
And he basically kind of explains, look, Colonel, I'll treat their wounds, heal their wounds, bind their wounds, but I will not inflict their wounds. You can't just sit there. I may be sitting on the outside, but I'm running on the inside. For God's sakes, man, defend yourself. Don't think of it as a gun. Think of it as a great little noise maker. The loudest cap pistol in Korea. Alright, I can do that. That moment right there pretty much sums up MASH for me. It is so good. And that's also just Viken in a nutshell. He's a hard ass, but he's also, he can be quite whimsical when he wants to be.
So my question is to our listeners out there. What piece of lore or what do you want to know about the world next? What's intriguing about the Knights? What else do you want to know about this world? And how would you use the Knights if you chose to use them in your own game?
So that's basically all the lore of the Solarus Knights. Do you have any thoughts before we actually wrap up?
They sound like a very interesting organization. Definitely one of those things that you don't want your players getting on the wrong side of. For example, when I run Waterdeep Dragon Heist, I make sure I let my players know that the guards in that town are retired adventurers. They've slain their dragons. They've gotten their treasure. They just want to have a little excitement in their golden years. And they're level 18, 19, 20. You commit a crime, they're gonna find you. These knights sound like, don't mess with the king. They will stop you. If somehow something gets through their area of protection and Kingfair gets assassinated or attempted assassination, it sounds like whatever did that probably just wiped out the entire kingdom with like a meteor strike. They didn't even get through the knights. They just squished everything around them.
It would take a lot to get through the knights, but if they do succeed, well, let's just say the knights are not going to be too happy, but they're also going to be they're going to go on the warpath, and you do not want that in any capacity. It's like I don't know. It's like sending like a Jedi to squash a bug.
It would be a huge misuse of their power.
Yeah, but if that bug just so happens to be the size of, I don't know, a house, then maybe send in the knight.
Perhaps. So I'm interested to hear what else other people want to learn about this world as we cover different aspects of the working bits and pieces of how it all comes together.
All right, so that's it for our episode. Don't forget to support us on our pages, the Patreon, and all that. And we'll see you next time.